everyone here who is in the room, which is absolutely packed. And those who are joining us online, we really appreciate you taking the time in a very, very busy week. And I'm thrilled to be having this conversation. And the reasons we're focusing on the hidden economy of harm is that, unfortunately, this is not an emerging issue or an emerging threat. It's one that's been pervasive throughout history, but it has in fact been hidden, and it has not been on the security agenda. And so I'm grateful to both of you who have been working on issues related to human trafficking and forced labor for your careers. There's a lot to be said, and there's a lot to be learned from your experience and what we all can do to make a difference on this issue, which is not only inflicting immeasurable harm on human beings, but it's also sustaining an economy that's fueling organized crime and transnational networks, and it needs to be more concertedly and collaboratively addressed. And so thank you both for being here, and would really love to dive in and hear from you both. And Ioana, I'd like to turn to you first. You know, conflict and instability around the world is creating an environment that is enabling of human trafficking. But at the same time, human trafficking is creating and fueling an environment that is perpetuating it and perpetuating this cycle. And so I'm curious, from your perspective and your experience, how are you seeing this manifest, and why does this absolutely need to be on the security agenda?
First of all, thank you so much for diving into this topic, which is not an easy topic. And as you mentioned, it's not a lot of times addressed within the security framework. So the fact that we're doing this, I think, is extremely important. Conflict and instability makes human trafficking thrive. Basically, every time you have a lot of people on the move, especially with conflict, which we know that the cost paid a lot of times is in the lives and the security of every human being, but especially that of those of women and children. That makes for the perfect landscape for compound vulnerabilities to come together and make people more susceptible to human trafficking. Human trafficking starts with the dream of a better life. So whenever you're escaping any type of conflict, whoever comes with an offer of safety, with an offer of a better life somewhere away and in safety, that is gonna become the way in which people end up being trapped into exploitation. And here we're talking about sexual exploitation, and since we are talking conflict, looking at the Ukrainian conflict, for example, we know that women and children were moving and overlapping. We have the statistics that victims for the purpose of sexual exploitation are mostly women and children, about 89% of the victims identified globally. So in a way, it creates this perfect storm. Also, you have the erosion of the rule of law and the deprioritization of the protection measures because resources are going elsewhere. Therefore, human traffickers come in and fill that gap. And as you mentioned, we have the victims that end up fueling this economy, and then you have profits that end up financing other forms of organized crime. In our experience, we keep seeing human trafficking cases overlapping with money laundering and overlapping with drug trafficking and overlapping with arms trafficking and other forms of organized crime. So trafficking ends up financing all these other forms of organized crime that we see around.
Thank you for that. I think you really set the stage well and laid the framework for what we need to dive into in terms of the scale of the problem, the magnitude of the problem, and what can be done to combat it. And so, Kari, I'd like to turn to you. You're working with OSCE member states on this issue in particular, and I'm curious how you're seeing these financial flows through the system and the impacts that it's having to fuel other instability.
I also want to thank you very much for bringing human trafficking to this forum and framing it as an emerging threat. I think exactly at this intersection with illicit financial flows and the increasing linkages between human trafficking and other crimes, as Ioana said, drug trafficking, financial crimes, including fraud, and money laundering, corruption, all of these are increasingly interrelated. And they're interrelated critically in the area of financial flows, where traffickers are moving their money through other financial crimes and illicitly moving the proceeds from human trafficking. But also, not only that one criminal is engaging in more and more kinds of crimes together, including human trafficking, drug trafficking, et cetera, but also that victims are being compelled to engage in or exploited in multiple crimes at the same time or over the course of their exploitation. So we're just seeing these links growing and growing. On the financial flow side, we are definitely seeing that the proceeds of trafficking are being used increasingly to fund other illegal and illicit activity. And just to put it in context, the amount of the profits that we're talking about, probably conservative estimates, the International Labor Organization estimates that $236 billion are the profits in any given year from human trafficking. And the NASDAQ Verifin gives an even higher estimate of $346.7 billion. So we're talking about a lot of money that can make a huge impact, particularly not only in conflict, your previous question, but also in other crises and other situations where vulnerabilities are increased because people are on the move or outside of their normal system and structures of support. The COVID pandemic, I think, is another really good example of that, where we saw the rapid increase of especially online sexual exploitation, unfortunately increasingly of children, and also what is now the fastest growing form of human trafficking, and that is trafficking for forced scamming, where not just the people are having their money stolen and defrauded, but the people that are compelled to do that increasingly are trafficking victims. And that's also taking a huge toll on societies.
I'd like to ask you both, what are the biggest gaps in the ways you're seeing the ability to track the flow of these illicit funds and the ability to act?
So this is an area that I think bears a lot of promise going forward, both technology companies and also the financial sector. So I think this is a really important area, to your point about everyone has a role to play. Following the money is, I think, one of the most important ways that we can make progress, in part so that we can hit traffickers where it matters the most to them, and that's the money. This is a profit-driven crime, but also so that we can build better cases to actually bring the criminals to justice. So we're seeing some important developments in this area. One of the things that we at the OSCE have done back in 2019 was issue guidance on red flag indicators so that financial institutions, banks, money transfer, including even cryptocurrency, know what to look for in terms of trafficking. They already have to report on suspicious activity. They can now also include trafficking indicators there. And we've done some important financial partnerships, bringing together the private sector with financial intelligence units and law enforcement so that they can all connect the dots and really follow the money. And I think it's exciting to see that the private sector is increasingly paying attention in this area.
And to pick up on that, and I wanted to go to you, one of the reasons I'm so excited that you both are here is you have such distinct but complementary expertise and experience. And this issue, as you both very well described, is pervasive throughout societies. And I know, Ioana, you've been working at a community level and have recently won an award from the Schwab Foundation about innovative models working at a community level. And so I'm curious, from your experience and your perspective, what are some of the community-based approaches that are working to help mitigate some of the risks and also support the victims?
I think it's so important to look at the fact that we're still not identifying human trafficking. It's hidden in plain sight. You mentioned that this is a crime that we all live with. If it's not on your street, it's on the neighboring street for sure. I can guarantee that. It's definitely in your pockets if you're holding a phone or it's in your hands. So this idea that human trafficking happens somewhere far away and it doesn't impact us is false, and it actually affects all of us and all of our safety. At a community level, I think it's so important to actually look for trafficking where it happens, because a lot of times we are so used to it. We believe myths. We put the blame on the victim. We are very used to actually overlooking situations that make us feel weary. And instead of reporting it, we just look away. So for us, the most important thing that we've been doing is we've been engaging with everyone, non-traditional actors, so not just your police officers or social workers, but everyone, talking about what the signs are and where you can report it. So we need to start reporting trafficking more. We also need to actually gain the insights from the survivors of human trafficking and actually build on the expertise that they've gained by experience, and to do that in an ethical way, in a way where we're offering dignified work and conditions and platforms for them to share that expertise. And we're learning a lot. All of our community level programs are informed by survivors, whether we're talking about the activity that we're doing in Romania or in Ukraine or East Africa. It's always learning from the people who have been through this experience.
And to that end, you're working at the community level, but Kari, you're working at a member state level and also trying to think through and work with member states to develop strategies to combat these issues. And so how are you making that bridge between the communities and victims so that those member state policies and strategies can be more informed?
So a lot of what we're doing is building on the work that Ioana is doing at the community level and that civil society and survivor leaders and lived experience experts are advocating for. And that is to ensure that the systems that OSCE participating states have are survivor and trauma informed, that they take a whole of society approach. So it's not just the police or the border management or migration officer that might encounter a trafficking victim, but putting in place in their systems a comprehensive victim identification and protection model, so that teachers and doctors and nurses and anyone that might come in contact with a trafficking victim knows what to look for and then what to do, and that there are strong systems to refer them to. That's one piece of it. The other piece of it is we at the OSCE are very committed to helping our member states understand how are the traffickers evolving, how is the crime evolving, and then the profile of trafficking victims, and urging them and helping them to update their strategies and their systems and their policies, including increasingly with the use of technology, leveraging the power of technology for good in the fight against human trafficking and to protect victims, also working with financial partnerships to both follow the money and also critically to make sure that that aspect of victim protection also helps survivors move on with debt relief and rebuilding their own financial well-being and independence as well.
And this is such a global issue, that intelligence sharing and lessons learned and establishing those networks to be able to better and more effectively communicate in real time will, I imagine, be part of that. So we're out of time, unfortunately, but want to ask you both, what would be a game changer in this space so that this issue remains on the security agenda? I'll turn to you first.
One thing that we haven't discussed, we've talked about the money, but we didn't talk about where the money comes from. As long as people are willing to pay for the exploitation of others and we're not doing anything to go after that type of crime, we're not going to be able to make strides. So making sure that we actually address the demand that actually drives exploitation is extremely, extremely important.
I would add two things super fast. One is on the financial side. A real game changer would be if the Financial Action Task Force, that's the regulator for financial intelligence units, required more concerted, coordinated effort to identify trafficking in the financial flows. And then the other piece, coming back to keeping the people who are affected by this in mind. We have to do a much better job at actually identifying the victims and stop punishing the victims so that we use our resources to go after the real criminals.
Thank you for that. Everyone in this room is coming from a different space, whether it's policy, whether it's finance, security, and in our daily lives. And I think you both said it very well. We all have a role to play in combating this issue and to ensuring that it maintains a focal point on the security agenda. So thank you both for your work and raising everyone's awareness about this issue today.